This book was recommended to me by a podcast, The Gray Area by Vox Media. It proposed an idea that I align with, and as such, I've purchased the book to read for myself. It pitched the idea that the huge problem that led to things that totally aren't currently happening was that those with morality lack ambition, and those with ambition lack morality. And this book is supposed to bridge that gap, hence the name Moral Ambition. On page 5 gives this chart with 4 possible options. And generally the firm lines set in self-help books should actually be imagined as incredibly blurry, except to those who genuinely need them as a tool for improvement. Based on an alignment chart of not so ambitious and ambitious on one axis and not so idealistic and idealistic on the other, where idealistic is seemingly defined as having a strong attachment to a good moral code. Now here's a good reminder for you that these books should be taken with a grain of salt, because it says that I'd be in the top right corner, idealistic and ambitionless, because I'm just making YouTube content, promoting morality as a hobby, but says that as an essential worker, being a truck driver, that I can't be defined as immoral or unambitious. And let me be the first to tell you that I'm a truck driver only because it's the only trade I could get into and it pays enough for me to live. Personally, my dreams as a content creator in this space are really waiting on my takeoff, frankly, and learning about SEO and seeing what creators like the guy I shamelessly copied, Friendly Jordies, whose house was set on fire for his opposition to the government, can do. I'd like to say that this kind of thing can be pretty ambitious if it works out. I just want to input right here that I recorded this video before the events of Charlie Kirk's demise, but that should prove my point even if I didn't agree with the guy. Again, the fine lines that exist in books like this exist for those who need it. It actually starts with a prologue about a monk that clocked several tens of thousands of hours in meditation, feeding his brain good thoughts, and it rewired it so completely it could only feel happy. But asks if he contributed anything for the rest of us in that endeavor. But anyway, that's what these books are like. They're things to feed your brain when you desperately want it rewired. Tread carefully though, because if you let a book like The Dark Enlightenment rewire you, you'll be on a bad path. Anyways, back to the context of this book. It finds a correlation between pay and an increase towards worthless and then even evil jobs. The chapter continues to get more in-depth explanation of its top right corner that it would put me in, and explains the failings of being moral and unambitious, avoiding meat, reducing your carbon footprint, and not using plastic straws, etc. These are just removing yourself from the equation. You aren't helping, you're just not existing. Same for getting into arguments and rants online. Guilty as charged. Our author doesn't want awareness with moral inaction to be the goal. He wants action. He wants money to lobby. He wants foundations to organize and clever little loopholes to be morally ambitious. Awareness is a starting point and served as a pillar of the goal. It's not the whole project, though. It's barely even any part of it. He goes on to ask what makes the personality difference. And after regaling us with the tales of heroes from this time period or that one, he concludes with research and finds that most people do the right thing when asked, specifically asked in person. And the people most likely to ask someone to do something in person like that are known to be bad kids in school or church and such, described as strong-willed. So basically, if you grew up giving your teachers a problem, there's a likelihood that you have the unique ability to ask people to do good for others. And subsequently, if no one is willing to help, maybe consider you're not doing good things. And he likens this power to spreading a virus. You ask someone, and then they ask someone, and then they ask someone. Once you ask someone and they get the momentum of it, eventually they ask someone else for help to keep moving. And eventually you have a revolution. And then he says, If you're not one of these people who can ask the question or find strength to be good on your own, preferring, albeit maybe regrettably, to ignore it or wait it out, you can still do the easy work of finding someone willing to ask you for help. Whether they do or not is up to them. You haven't done anything, but you've increased your likelihood of being asked, and therefore your likelihood of being part of the ambition. Such as like, comment, subscribe. Thank you. Skip ahead to about page 78. After many insightful tales of heroes and advice for making a movement, the author is talking about a problem, about infighting, and then segues into a need for utopia or apocalypse. It's a false dichotomy that is proven to exist too strongly in modern conversation around progress. It's basically that idea that we absolutely take everything good that needs to be done, put it on a list, and assume it all works together, and we do it all at once. Or we tear everything down and rebuild it all at once. That's where this utopia or apocalypse terminology comes from. Because either we radicalize democracy to force its completion in like an impossibly short time period with no compromise, or we destroy society and rebuild a radical one. Obviously that won't work. But as I've been talking to more people in this space of creators, I'm becoming a part of it. It seems many thinkers do think like this. Not of the small pieces we need to bite off here or there, or the compromises we need to accept where we might be a little uncomfortable with them. But it's just in the meantime, we can get better results down the line. To quote the book, the risk of an all or nothing approach is that you can shoot for the moon, then don't even get off the ground. There's a whole school of thought around finding the things you can do with most effect per dollar. No, literally, there's a school. The book talks about a school in London that takes in students judged based on their ambition to do good and train them on how to make a real actionable difference and then send them away with some real startup capital. The chapter following emphasizes the disappointment in geniuses that go into app development and product engineering when they could invent things like the polio vaccine if they stepped outside of the path of least resistance, providing examples where tech innovation saved lives, and where dodgy funding cost lives. And he hesitantly uses the word tech, knowing it brings to mind, quote, a tax-dodging billionaire who shoots himself into space to fill the gaping hole in his soul. But he wants to dispel the idea of tech being evil. We can use it for our moral revolutions if we decide to use it that way. Philosophy is the next science he tackles, giving us the thoughts of a Peter Singer who posed that if you saw a baby drowning in an inch of water, but saving them would ruin your new fancy expensive shoes, would you save them? Of course, the answer to that question is yes, you would save them, but only when you can see the baby. The price of a new pair of shoes could save the lives of whole villages depending on how you use it and which organization you donate to. It only costs like $2 to send an insecticide-treated mosquito net to places where malaria is still a problem, and the cost of a pair of Air Jordans can save a whole community. There's an argument in this chapter on philosophy that we've become so accustomed to our way of living that we don't realize that our average American, even one in poverty, makes more than 85% of the world. And relatively, our money could change the lives as much as billionaires could change our lives. And we don't have the same public outcry about the sharing of wealth and decreasing the gap when it's towards those below us, because we don't really see it that way. We've convinced ourselves that we're poor by American standards, the way a millionaire might convince them they're poor by billionaire standards. And frankly, I do feel poor, and that's kind of the point he's making. Globally, I'm one of the world's top earners. I'm in the top 15% of the world population. How come I'm not sharing my immense wealth? And part of that argument is that my local part of this world is much more expensive to live in. With the cost of living in most impoverished countries being only around $275 a day. Which, in another argument, for the pair of shoes, how many days of food could you feed a child overseas? And that kind of builds to a counterpoint of this book thus far, discussing an organization called Effective Altruism, whose goal is convincing you to set aside part of your income and use it only for a cost-effective charity. The author brings up the case of a man who passionately focused on the idea of building dams in Africa, but via an intervention with EA, Effective Altruism, realized that he could save infinitely more people by going into the job market as a stingy banker and donating 10% of his income. Whereas up until now, the book argued against going into a corporate job because they were impactless and at worst, downright evil. But if that's your path, then this book still leaves a path for you to make a difference. The author doesn't necessarily agree with that path though. He rips it apart as assuming every young entrepreneur is immune to the moral corruption. He notes that Sam Bankman-Fried, the crypto guru that made off with billions of dollars who were almost directly given to him by his followers, and then arrested for fraud, got his start through Effective Altruism. Bregman, the author, also notes that their obsession with research-backed effectiveness steers them away from big picture projects, like early investments in vaccine research and solar. The EA creed pushes them to donate some money to already established organizations with a high rate of success. Which, all good arguments, the effective altruist serves a certain niche in the world of making a difference. They may not be project leaders, but they're effective project funders. If you lead a project, your goal should be to make it as attractive as possible for an effective altruist. Imagine after 5 years of working and scraping every dollar of the project, some millionaire just starts sending you 10% of their income every month. You can ignore their moral failings. After all, it's just funding your project now. He's doing good. I'm gonna start skipping a lot because I want this video to be short and for y'all to maybe read this book for yourselves. But he shares with us 6 warning signs that a common practice might need moral ambition to intervene. Number 1, we've long heard what's wrong with it. Number 2, we say that that's just the way it is. Number 3, we avoid uncomfortable facts about it. Number 4, we ridicule its opponents. Number 5, we find it hard to justify to children who haven't learned the world yet. And 6, we suspect future generations will find it barbaric. To this, I propose some common practices that we can easily apply against these. Tax cuts for the rich, deportation of migrants, internet gambling, transphobia, pro-life or anti-abortion laws, private health care, and fossil fuels. And Bregman's own big example is factory farming of animals. Personally, I can eat enough meat in one sitting to keep factory farms in business, but I get the vision. Skipping ahead again to the epilogue, Bregman explains the existential crisis of forgetting about normal people and getting so caught up in moral ambition, you forget to love people and enjoy life. He also explains that not everyone has the strength for moral ambition within them. Quote from the book, "There's one last thing I'd like to emphasize. This book is written for you and no one else. Don't wield it as a weapon, but to whip yourself into shape. See the good in others and demand more of yourself." And then the book ends and includes an announcement for a moral ambition school that he's making, similar to the one he mentioned. It's built on 7 core principles. 1, action. 2, impact. 3, radical compassion. 4, open-mindedness. 5, kindness. 6, zest for life. And 7, perseverance. And a QR code included. Let me see if I can throw that up for you. There you go. If it will focus. I'll maybe throw it up on a picture later. I personally think I'll hold on to this book for a long time as a Bible for doing good. I'd highly recommend giving it a read. Honestly. Thank you so much for watching and stay a fan.